your time to attend this talk. I'm Julian. If you are curious, siguro 1% of you are curious who I am. I'm from Cranial Vault Games, which is a design group, and I'm also representing Unpop Philippines. We're a group who tries to make games and play them with everybody who wants to go. Anyway, just to start things off, may we call on the man with the plan, Mr. Adrian Manahan of Gaming Library.
Alright, this will be short. I'm here to introduce our guest speaker today. Let me just read from this. Eric Lang, born in Montreal, Canada, has been designing tabletop and digital games professionally for the last 17 years. Games based on awesome licenses like Star Wars, Marvel, and DC Comics, Lord of the Rings, World of Warcraft, A Game of Thrones, Warhammer, XCOM, Call of Cthulhu, and many more. He's also designed many original themed games such as Warriors, Arcadia Quest, Duelist, which is a digital game that just came out, Blood Rage, which we just finished our first finals tournament in Manila, Blood Rage! And Chaos Ball, with several new original IPs currently in development. He's worked with a lot of companies, a lot of publishers, a lot of great ones, Wizards of the Coast, Fantasy Flight Games, Mattel, WizKids, and Cool Mini or Not. So again, to maximize our time with him, I won't say any more. May I call him to the stage, Eric Lang. I'm just the moderator.
Don't moderate.
No, I'm moderator.
I'm just going to ask everybody a quick favor just before we start. I'd like to take a little picture of the crowd that we got here. It's my first time talking to the Philippines. So I'm just going to tell everybody, we're in Canada. By the way, I travel to a lot of different countries, a lot of different audiences. I always ask somebody to do something cool to show that they're cooler than everybody else, that they're a better group of gamers than everybody else. So whatever you guys want to do for the camera, remember, the internet is forever. But let's show how much cooler we are than anybody else. Hot like that. Awesome, thank you. So hi, I'm Eric. I make games. As Adrian said, I've been doing this for a long time professionally. I'm based out of Toronto, Canada. I've worked with companies in the US, in Asia, in Europe, but always out of Canada. It's my homeland, I love it. And I've worked on pretty close to every type of game that you can imagine. I've worked on board games, card games, dice games, miniature games, massively multiplayer online games. I've never made it. I've worked on a lot of digital games actually that didn't get published, probably more than did. Trading card games, and I think I've got publishing credits on everything except for role-playing games. I started with role-playing games way back in the day. I started with D&D, second edition, 1998. Who played D&D? Who got into a hobby because of D&D? Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Best game ever. That's what got me. I've been playing games my whole life since I was a little kid. I used to play games with my grandmother in Germany, and I played bad games, like mass market, really bad games. Imagine Parcheesi or Sorry, but even worse than that. And so I got really bored playing these games, and I would modify them, and I put robots in and dinosaurs in. 'Cause I'm 8 years old, right? And then I played Stratego, and I thought that was pretty cool, play games. But when I played D&D for the first time, I remember like it was yesterday. A friend of mine that I met while I was working at a fast food place, he brought me to a friend's house. And he said, "We're going to try a new type of game." I was like, "Oh, game!" Like I was in high school, where it's like I wanted to be a rock star. I was like, "Games." I used to play games, but they're not cool anymore. But I walked in, and there was a bunch of gamers sitting there with pieces of paper and a book. I go, "Where's the game?" And they said, "Well, we're going to play Dungeons and Dragons. Here's a character for you. You can name, do anything you want." And I had played, before that, I played games like Final Fantasy for the Super NES or Zelda, Link to the Past. So like that Nintendo fans here? Yes! Because they're awesome. And so I was like, "Oh, role-playing, I know that game. I know those kind of games." So he said, "All right, so you're in a bar with this character you just made, and the bartender comes up and says, and all of a sudden you hear something that sounds kind of weird. What do you do?" I was like, "Well, what are my options? Give me a list of my options." He said, "You can do anything you want." I was like, "Anything you want? Anything I want?" I'm like, "Yeah, anything you want." It's like, "What, you mean I could just run out of the bar, jump into the river and drown myself?" Like, "Yeah, I guess you run out in the river and drown yourself." So I committed suicide as my first gaming experience of all time. But it blew my mind. It was like I could do anything I want. It changed my viewpoint on what games could be, that they're creative expressions of your own personality, of your power fantasies, which is what most of us play D&D for. Anything you could want to be. And so I played role-playing games like that for years and years afterward. Designed my own role-playing games. Didn't publish any of them, thank God, because they weren't very good. But then, of course, Magic: The Gathering hit in 1993, and right? Magic. Yeah. What's your favorite Magic set? Versus Legacy. Yeah. Broken. It's not fun if it's not broken. When Magic came out in 1993, when it first came out, it was. I'm not sure how many of you guys were around the gaming scene at that time. The gaming scene was all role-playing games at that point, and that game hit, and we're like, "What is this? It's not even complete. You don't even get all the cards in the box. This is dumb." Then we played it, and from the first time I played it, I was like, not only was I like, "Wow, this is pretty cool," I realized very, very quickly that this is what I want to do for a living. I've been designing games by myself, for my friends, all that, for years and years. But at that point, I said, look, I saw the level of discipline and professionalism that had to go into this game, years of development, and it changed the game, it changed the industry completely. The way the game industry looked globally before Magic and the way it looks now are two completely different things. That's only happened twice since then. Once, again, with Pokemon, and the other time with Settlers of Catan. I knew it. I was going to do that, and so I spent years rearranging my entire life to go, I'm going to design games. I worked at game stores, doing consulting for game stores, running events for Pokemon, in fact. Many of the kids I ran Pokemon for are now my peers at game companies. That's kind of weird. I worked for Nintendo retail for a little while. They had a retail store in North America where they sold only Nintendo games. During the period that Sega Genesis was out, so Nintendo was getting crushed. Unfortunately, they didn't last very long. And then I designed my own games, started my own game company to publish my own games. And then finally I was tired of that. I mean, I published some games, we got some decent success. I did a tarot card game called Mystic, which was out of print. I don't think you could even get it anymore. And then I made relationships with Fantasy Flight Games. Was at that time they were producing a game called Disc Wars. Does anybody remember Disc Wars? Yes. Wow, I love this crap. All right. Disc Wars was like pods. Those little tiny. By the way, you don't ever tell Fantasy Flight guys that Disc Wars is like pods. They don't like to hear that. But it's true. I said. It's a little game that you played with cardboard circles that you would move around, like end over end of miniature games. It was really cool. And I was like, these guys are making innovative, cool, fun games that I would like to make. I want to be these guys anyway. I should work with them. And ironically enough, that very winter, I met them at a game convention in Germany called Essen. I told them I was going to close down my company. I wasn't really interested in publishing, but I just want to design games. They're like, well, do you want to design games for us? Like, yes, I do. And that's, from there on in, it's history. I made God knows how many games with Fantasy Flight. I still make games with them. Really good relationship with them. And since then, I've worked with a ton of other companies, making a lot of other games. And I'm here today to answer any of you guys' questions. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff you guys want to know about the industry. You can ask me pretty close to anything, but about the creative process itself, how we make games. If I was told many times that Filipinos love stories, I got a million stories from many different companies I worked for. I even worked for a while with distribution. The most boring part of the industry, but necessary. The guys that sell, that take manufacturers' games, amalgamate them, and sell them to retailers. I worked in tournament organizing, all that stuff, all that crazy stuff. I worked with licensors, worked on games of my own. The only things I can't really answer about are, I can't talk about trade secrets, of course. I can't tell you, where do you get your miniatures done? I can't say that's a secret. Or stuff like, and I can't talk about games that are coming up. Generally, if I have a game that you've heard of and that's been announced, or even that hasn't been announced, as some of you guys follow me on Twitter, I talk about secret projects and stuff. I can't talk in detail about those because they are all for publishers, and it's the publisher's domain. They're the ones who get to decide when they're going to make announcements about that. I brought a few with me here this weekend, so afterwards, if you guys want later on tonight and tomorrow, I actually have prototypes for some of these upcoming games, one of which isn't even completely finished yet, so you get to see something kind of in progress. And we'll be playing them at the booth, probably from 6 o'clock on Sunday. But from that point on, that's my intro. That's all I want to say. From here on in, I just want to hear from you guys. What do you want to know? And I will answer as best as I can. Anything that's legal. Or not, we'll see.
So on a case-to-case basis, we'll check if it's legally answerable. Anyway, I'm sure you're all raring to ask questions, so let's open the floor for some question and answers. Please just approach the microphone.
Open the floor. There's sharks under there.
Yeah, there are sharks and
First,
krakens. Okay, sir.
there's one of your upcoming games which I actually had my favorite on. It's Bloodborne. Have you actually played it?
Have I played Bloodborne? I hope I designed it.
Well, you better tell Hidetaka Miyazaki that.
You mean the card game? Of course, you mean the console game. Yes.
Yeah. So you played it.
I did play Bloodborne. I didn't finish it.
I did though. Platinum. I got it. I got all the trophies.
Crazy.
I defeated all the bosses. Learned a lot, and I even defeated the bosses of the DLC chapter.
Well, dude, you are like miles beyond me. So here's what happened. So Bloodborne was everybody's familiar with Bloodborne?
Yes.
Bloodborne is an unbelievably, ungodly, difficult, and frustrating
Action RPG.
Yeah, I mean, I almost want to call it a sandbox game. It's so open, you can do pretty much anything in that game. It is made by the same studio who did Dark Souls and Demon Souls, and I actually played Dark Souls. I was a huge fan of Dark Souls.
I got Dark Souls 3.
I have Dark Souls 3 actually. I have it. I haven't opened it. I'm not going to play it because I don't have the time. It's either that or
That's understandable.
I either get to make games or I get to play Dark Souls.
Is this even on?
It's just like on.
Oh no, someone.
Mine may not be.
Okay.
Dark Souls is, so I was a big fan of Dark Souls, and I was actually at the Cool Mini or Not office. We were working on something else, and I don't remember what it was. It might have been Blood Rage even a couple years ago. And
there you are.
they had told me that,
Hello.
hello. They had told me that they were working on they had a license for Bloodborne, And I had heard of Bloodborne at the time, but I hadn't played it. I knew that it was. I was like, they're like, "Do you like Bloodborne?" I'm like, "Yeah, I love Dark Souls." So they're like, "All right, well, here's a PS4. Play the game."
Yes,
I was
it's
like-
only exclusive to that.
I'm like, "Okay, let's do it." And I played, and I almost threw it away in 30 minutes. It was rough. That was a rough game. However, I mean, I love it. I mean, I love games. I'm also a big XCOM fan, so I love games that punish you repeatedly and terribly. But I knew very, very quickly what kind of game that we wanted for Bloodborne. I think I knew what kind of game we wanted for Bloodborne within 7.5 minutes. Those of you who have played probably know what that means, but I don't want to talk too much about it because if you guys haven't played it, if you like action RPGs, please try it. It's really good. Just, be prepared to cry into your pillow a lot because you die. But,
And prepare to be mind blown by all the Lovecraftian horrors.
and well, I'm a fan of Lovecraftian stuff. Hopefully that's not a secret. So that game. Now that game is this is actually a pretty good idea of what goes into licensing games because licensed games. As a designer, right? I'm not the publisher. I'm the designer. So I'm one part of the great machine that makes these games, and I don't always have 100% control over how a game gets made, and neither does the publisher, even in the case of a licensed game. So we decided that the publisher and us, and to a lesser degree the licensor, to an equal degree the licensor, that we're going to make this game. It was not going to be a big box board game. It wasn't going to have tons of miniatures in it. The idea was to make a game that would sell to be a really good crossover title. To sell at a place called GameStop. I don't know if you guys know what that is here. It's a big chain of video game retailers in the States that also sell game stuff. There's a certain type of gamer that crosses over from those type of from console games and into board games, and they are not going to tolerate a 2-hour big box board game with tons of miniatures. I love those. I hope you guys love this. But I also design other kind of games. So the design decisions that went into Bloodborne were aimed almost entirely off of the audience that we were going for. It's an hugely important part of design, right? It's not always, only one part of it is I want to make a game that works, right? That's like maybe 5% of it. In a game that works like the minimum bar. Of course it has to work. It has to not be broken. It has to be balanced. It has to have a good ending condition. It has to have a variety of strategies. It has to have blah, 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 all that stuff. That's hard to do already, but that's bare minimum. We also decide who is this game going to be for? Who is this game not going to be for? No game is for everybody. No game will appeal to everybody. Absolutely not. So one of the things I ask myself often when I make games is who's going to love this game and who isn't going to love this game? And based on that, I know that if there are people that are not going to love this game, I'm not going to change the game to suit those people because they're not going to want it anyway. I'd rather make a game that like 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 people love than a game that millions of people will buy once and maybe put in their closet because they don't really care in the first place. So that's a really big part of it. That's Bloodborne.
Well, may the good blood guide your way, Eric.
Well, we'll see when we'll play next time I come to the Philippines.
Okay, next question, please. All right, down the line. Mike?
Oh, they bring you the mic. It's service.
So, have you ever encountered gamers or design burnout? If so, how do you deal with it?
Have I ever encountered gamers?
Gamer or designer burnout.
Oh, okay. I was like, have you ever encountered gamers? That like reminds me of you're walking through the woods and all of a sudden, gamer! I actually met gamers just a little while ago. We were walking into a room where we were going to talk about games, and then somebody asked me if you ever encountered gamers, and crazy. Yes. So the question is, have I ever encountered game burnout with games or design? Yeah, several times actually. I work on big box games. Often I work on somewhere between 7 to 11 games at a time. I think I'm working on like 12 now at a time. Now this is like games take a very, very long time to make. They take years, not years, but they take up from 9 months to like a year and a half, maybe 2 years to make. And so I'm at a different stage at every single game I'm working on. And that's a lot of stuff, that's a lot of games, and I play test them all at varying different stages. I don't necessarily burn out on games, period. I did that once when I was working on social media. Remind me, I got thrown the story about working on Facebook games. That's a thing, because I'll be related to burnout, but it's a fairly long story. But generally, I tend to work a burnout on different games at a time. And very often for a big box game, like even Blood Rage. Blood Rage is a good example. I worked on that game for a year, I think, maybe a little bit more than a year. And for several periods during that year, I would just completely burn out. I put it away for a couple months. I play test it and go like, all right, I've made a bunch of little changes to it. The changes aren't actually making it better, they're just making it worse. I don't have anything new for this, I'm gonna put it away for a while. And then after a couple of months, I come back. I've played many other games, I've worked on many other games. And then I come back to, I would come back to Blood Rage and go like, all right, I got a fresh perspective on it. I don't really care about the old design decisions I make. I don't care about the old work I put into it. I'm just playing it, wanting it to be fun. And if anything that isn't, it's gone. That's a really, for those of you who are involved in creative stuff, this works across professions. If you don't have a deadline, if you don't have an impossibly short deadline, which I used to have, I don't have so much anymore, the ability to take time away, like walk away from a piece of work and then come back to it later, is absolutely invaluable. I do that all the time now. Like almost every game that I've got coming out this year has taken double or triple as long as any of my shorter games used to, because of that. So, short answer, burnout, yes, but it's kind of necessary.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from here. Mic service.
That costs extra, by the way.
Hello. Yeah.
Hi.
So my question is related to game designing. So I started been into board games about 2 years since until now. And then what
Pretty hard, huh?
Yeah. I'm looking at creating my own games. Like I'm sort of into stage now wherein I'm having a hard time looking at if this is getting too complicated. Like I'm deciding on creating a game that's only 30 minutes game time, but suddenly I realize it's slowly becoming a complicated RPG. So what are your tips on new game designers that wanted to go to join in the creating games on our own or something like that?
Well, I'm gonna, since you gave me a specific, I'm gonna answer your specific, because I love those questions are cool, I think a little better. So, you were working on a game that you wanted it to be short, and it turned into something that's really complicated and a different game than you ended up with. So my question is, do you like RPGs?
Yes.
Then make an RPG. So I know it sounds a little flip, but it's very, very seldom does a game end where, unless you have absolute restrictions and absolute commercial, like if you have a game commission, they say, I need a game that is exactly blah, 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 and they give you a checklist how to do that, then you do whatever the heck you want with a game. There's a principle here. I'm calling it the Polanski principle. I don't think this is actually who it's attributed to, but I'm giving him credit for it anyway. So I was watching I watch a lot of TV, and a lot of TV. Some of my favorite TV shows are Joss Whedon shows, Buffy, Angel, Firefly, all that stuff. Joss Whedon fans? Yeah, that's right. So I was watching I totally devour I love watching all of the special features, the commentary, behind the scenes stuff, because in my other life I'm a writer and I've always wanted to work in television, all that stuff. I don't, thank God, much better at games. But I love listening to the behind the scenes stuff. And I was watching a video it was an episode I believe was of Angel, and Joss was talking about how he was talking to director Roman Polanski. I think it was him, it may have been somebody else, but Polanski sounds cool, so I'm giving him the credit. He was writing an episode, and he was having, it was a really good story, and he was iterating it, and there was a point where he had everything mapped out, he already had scenes done, and acted, and they were in the editing room, and it wasn't working. There was something bugging him about it, and he couldn't quite nail it. Like the episode, it flowed from beginning to end, but it wasn't working. It wasn't firing on all cylinders. He couldn't name it. People watched it, couldn't nail it. So Polanski, in his in his role as Yoda of the movie industry, I'm not going to do a Yoda voice. I was about to do a Yoda voice. He said to him, he said, "Oh yeah, I know when that happens. That happens all the time." So the solution for that is, when the thing you're working on isn't working, you're not quite sure why, you gotta dig down deep. Dig, grab your hand, go spring your chest, and dig down deep for where and why you came up with that story in the first place. What is the reason that you came up with that story? In this case, we're going to say gaming. Once you've found that, meditate on, do whatever you need to do. Once you've found that, then go back to your story and remove every element of that from your story. Because generally what happened is, what happens is your game, in this case we'll call it, has on its own, games design themselves to a degree. They should design themselves to a degree. Because we're all game players, we all have a shared understanding of how game rules are supposed to work, and games rely on intuition a lot. If there's a point where you're making a game where it starts telling you what it wants to be. You may try to force it in one direction, but it starts telling you what it wants to be, and you'll end up putting in the rules, putting in mechanics, changing the rules in order to make it work. And then you get to a point where it's done, and it isn't working. So then, in this case, it sounds to me like you were saying, like, this game needs to be 30 minutes, but the game is going on and on and on. And if the game is fun, if people are enjoying themselves, and you're finding yourself some dissonance in the game, get rid of the idea that it has to be 30 minutes. Take all of that out of the game. You'll probably find that the game will just naturally grow, and all those little bits that were still in there from your original vision, that's probably what's holding it back. Then you may even want to just completely throw the rules away and redesign that game without that principle, and see whatever falls out of it and comes. And you'll probably arrive where you are, but with a smoother game. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what kind of game you make, as long as you enjoy it, as long as it's something that you're passionate about. If you put in the time, the effort, the play testing, you have to put in the play testing. Put in the years. Put in years into the game if you can. It will probably come out just fine. Commercial, I don't know if I can tell you that. If you want to do this commercially, you have to follow a slightly different set of rules. But I'm going to stick on the level of, if you want to make a good game, we're an industry that's based on passion, on just love of the hobby. We're not Hollywood. We have some blockbusters, but we don't have a lot. Most of our games are made by individuals that just love gaming, and they want to make games that they really, really want to play. And all of their craft, all of the hard work they put into it is just to make sure that it works, and that it's smooth, that it flows, that it isn't wasting players' time. That comes. But don't worry about don't give yourself artificial restrictions if you don't need to. Unless that's what that sparks your initial creative drive. So when it comes to making games like that, just follow your passion to start with. If you want to make commercial games, we'll talk about that when another question comes up. I'm sure of it.
Thank you.
Next question: how do you make commercial games?
Something related to that. Hi, my name is James. I got hooked into gaming because of Dungeons and Dragons Red Box.
Red box. I got in with the blue box.
Okay. Cool. Red box or blue box? Okay. So you're in the industry, and then you basically work with a bunch of different properties, right?
Mhm.
And is it more the properties now, more on working with specific properties, or do you make your own? What's this is like my first question, right? So
You're talking licensed properties, you mean, right?
yeah.
Do I work more on licensed properties or more on my own?
Yeah,
My own.
original concepts from you, or concepts that you're forced to work with a specific property or license. Yes.
Okay. Well, so luckily, I'm in a position at this point where I'm not forced to work on anything. Like I don't. I'm actually like I have.
That's a life.
I'm sorry.
That's the life.
It is a life. It took me a long time to get to that life. I worked on a lot of stuff that I didn't want to in order to be able to afford that. But I don't work on any game that I don't love. And I actually, in fact, I throw away games all the time. Like even if I start off with a game, I love it at first. It's easy for me. It's really easy for me to fall out of love with games. Just ask my wife, who manages the garbage bin that most of my prototypes end up in, or tries to clean up my computer every once in a while. It's a nightmare in there. It's crazy. So I only work on stuff I want to start with. So I need to work on both licensed games and original properties. They have different qualities each that I really enjoy, and I couldn't imagine only doing one or the other. So licensed games. I mean, licensed games are always based on properties that you love, right? And I'm a fan. I mean, I love movies, I love comics, I love TV. There's so many awesome things out there that I want. And in fact, story time. Six months ago, no, it was 6 months ago. About 11 or 12 months ago, I was in the office at Cool Mini, or not. A lot of these are Cool Mini or not stories. They have an office. They have a room that calls Generate Stories here. I was in the Cool Mini office. I'm pretty sure I was working on finishing up The Others. This huge big box game I got coming out next year. One of the biggest game I've ever done. It broke me in half. That's how big it was. I was totally burnt out and working on finishing it. And my producer, David Preddy, who I work with on a lot of different projects, he walked into the office and said, so Eric, I've got some, I recognize his face, right? I know that look, and that look is, I got more stuff for you to do. And before he said, no more games, no more, I'm finishing this thing, I'm focused, nothing new, no new projects, I'm done for the year. And so he's Italian. As if that answers everything. He's Italian, he knows me well, and we work very well together. And so he was like, well then, okay. In that case, so we have the license for The Godfather, and I was wondering if you could recommend which designer you want to work on it. And so my reaction, of course, to that was, oh. Godfather? Like, of course I'm not going to let anybody else work on that. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. Godfather 1, by the way. I like the first one better than the second one. The second one's great. First one, amazing. There was no other movie. So I was like, of course I'm going to work on this game. And so I had no time, I had no free bandwidth, but I'm like, of course, I guess I'm just not going to sleep, or maybe I'll put Hearthstone away for a month, or that's it, I'm doing this game. Because I'm a fan, it's something I didn't know, like I didn't have this grand plan, I wasn't up for years going, ooh, if Godfather happens to come up, I'm going to make this game. I had no clue, but in that time, in that place, as soon as he said, I want to make a Godfather game, or we need to make a Godfather game, I knew immediately what general direction I wanted to go. It was just writing itself to a point. And that doesn't happen with original properties. right? Original properties are a completely different thing.
Can I add something there so that I guess you can move towards
Interruption, I love it, yes.
It's an iteration, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
there you go.
Design process between licensed and something from scratch. What's the difference, right? So
I was about to get there.
I know. That's
you
why.
just, you just framed it for, you're editing my questions. You're a developer, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, all right. So with the licensed game, watching you guys, with a licensed game, assuming you're a fan, right? I would never recommend working on a license that you are not a fan of. It's a grind. It's like, unless they're paying you $1 million, like driving to your home with a truck full of money, just don't. I did actually work on a game where there was a little tiny truck and there was money in it. Yeah, I did terrible. It didn't get published. It's a different story. The licensed games, they tap into something that you've already got, right? It's instant passion. It's something that you love right away. You'll quickly, as a creative person, hopefully, you'll have ideas for what you want to do. You'll probably already start with too many ideas. What's all this cool stuff I want to do? You have friends that love the property. You have family that loves the property. There's people you can talk to. You can go watch the thing again, read the thing again. Your source of inspiration is absolute and objective, no problem. Your starting point's really easy. The middle point, where you're working on it and then you have to deal with a whole bunch of different, where you have to deal with expectations, which for every property is wild and all over the map. Case in point, ask 20 different Star Wars fans what they want in a Star Wars game, and then make a bingo card and see how big it is. It's huge. It's an unwinnable game. That's the tough part. That's the really tough part. So with an original property, it's you and a blank page. There it is. Like with this blank page, it's got this unwritten invisible ink on it that says, "Make me awesome. Make me as good as that thing you just watched last week." I'm not, because you're not as good as the person who made the thing that you just watched last week. You suck, you're terrible, you're awful, don't make anything. That is the creative process I found for original games very often. The blank page is a very angry page, I don't like it. Now, a lot of original properties do come from inspiration, of course, right? You wake up in the shower one morning, you're like, I got a great idea. It's like Star Wars, except the lightsabers are made out of candy or something like that. That's my copyright. You don't get to make that. No stealing. You get inspiration, but still, the point of inspiration is there, but your research, your wellspring of inspiration is not there, right? You've got to make everything up. So you have to make an internally consistent IP, world, all that stuff, with no expectations except that nobody's going to care about your thing until you sell them on it. Most original properties that you see out there, especially mine, are Hollywood pitches. Right, the Hollywood pitch is very famous. Guy walks into a room and says, "I got a great story. It features the angst of man versus man and the sausage served in a man's hat," or something like that. And they'll be like, "It's dumb." Another man walks in and says, "I got a story. It's Star Wars meets Three's Company." And like, "Oh yeah, I get that." And then it's exactly two things. That's the Hollywood pitch. So most of the games I work on that are original are, on the surface, some kind of Hollywood pitch, right? It's Chaos Ball, for example, Chaos Ball is Blood Bowl meets anime. I actually had a specific anime, but that was a bad example. So I just said Blood Bowl meets anime. But it makes sense, right? The game is nothing like Blood Bowl. The anime isn't exactly anime, but it gives people already an idea. So on some level, isn't that kind of a licensed property already? Aren't you already licensing ideas off of something? That's an existential question and a rhetorical question, but that's a lot of my thought process for original stuff. When I'm working on original properties like Blood Rage, I got 2 new ones coming out that are original IPs that were designed by myself. I'm not setting out to be original. I'm not setting out to be the next Kurosawa. Maybe. Well, but right, I am no Scorsese or anything like that. I'm just a guy that likes a lot of stuff. I'm not particularly interested in selling people on the depth of story or mise en scène or any of that cool stuff, the filmmaker stuff. I just want a theme that is really easy to understand and relatable into how it is a game. If that theme I come up with explains the game a little bit and harnesses a little bit of player intuition, that's something that I want to work with. If it's instead a really, really cool, compelling story that somebody wants to watch, I probably won't even make it a game. I'll just make it a short story and work on that. That's the design practice difference there.
You've
Oh,
mentioned
you're gonna get a microphone, sir.
you've mentioned The Godfather. Have you heard of the game Lap Dance?
Have I heard of the game?
Lap Dance.
Lap
board
Dance.
game. It's a recent board game. What's your take about games that are politically incorrect? Does your game, The Godfather, have any flavor or mechanics that are politically incorrect? And
Well,
is that good for games?
I'll tell you, my game doesn't feature any lap dances. So that's a great question. So I'm
Or
gonna have to do-
flavor and mechanics?
I'm gonna have to do a little dance here. So, yeah. Political correctness in games. So, right now, I come from North America, and I don't know, I've only been here for a week, so I don't know the Filipino culture as well as I know the North American culture, except I know you guys like stories, and you guys have awesome food. Adobo. However, a big part of popular culture in North America is right now flirting with the idea that political correctness is a bad thing, and and to a degree it can be taken too far and all that stuff. I'm not a big fan of the term myself. I don't know if it's that meaningful. Generally, I do strongly believe one of my pet projects in games is to continually increase our level of inclusivity. Everybody games. Everybody likes games. I'm convinced of this. There is part of everybody, even people who say, I hate games, I'll never play a game. They play. They just don't know it yet. Not everybody's going to play Blood Rage, of course not. But sports are games. When you're Cowboys and Indians, it's a game. Jacks are a game. Arguing with your friends over whether Captain America can beat a Hulk in a spaceship on Endor is a game. Wow, that is a cool game. That's also my copyright. It's all games. So based on that, the fact that if you buy into that, if you buy into that theory that everybody has gaming in them to some degree, nobody wants to feel marginalized, right? Nobody wants to go into a game and feel like that something that they have no control over, their race, their orientation, their whatever that may be, is being mocked or made fun of or belittled or made to feel small in some way. I would much rather that we, instead of trying to make games for people of different groups, just try to, as a matter of course, not offend, not meaningfully diminish somebody's experience because of what's in the game. Now, I'm not saying, violence diminishes some people's experience, right? But some people die from violence. I'm not saying don't have violence in games. It's something that inside the magic circle of gaming, you can have fun. It's pretend stuff. I'm not a big fan of games that so I don't like to slag any games in public, right? But I'm not particularly a fan of, say, unnamed first-person shooters that are about killing Arabic people, right? It's not my thing. I would much rather play. I'd much rather play a game that's a little bit more fantastic, or even like a game like Silent Hill, right? Where that's pretty gross and pretty disgusting. I don't consider that politically incorrect. It's just really gross, shocking, and disgusting. And it scares the hell out of me every time I play it. That's fine. So interestingly enough, I would not consider The Godfather to be at all politically incorrect, even though they feature a lot of crazy stuff in there. It is historically relevant, and I have all that in there, right? That's all. I'm not cheating the history of Godfather to and pretend it didn't exist. I mean, has anybody not watched Godfather? Are we spoiler alerting here? Well, tough. It's been out for 40 years. There are car bombs in there. There are all the mafia bosses are white adult males wearing pinstripe suits. That's how it goes.
Priest assassins.
So interestingly enough, yeah, absolutely. So, and I also don't mind, and I absolutely have no problem with games that deal with uncomfortable subjects. I'm a big fan of that. There's a digital game called Papers, Please. All right. I like this game. Big fan of that game. Right. For those of you who don't know, Papers, Please is a game about being a about being a border crossing agent and trying to catch people from trying to stop illegals from getting into your country while managing all that. But the thing here, the point of the game is ultimately thematically it teaches you of like the actual boredom and banality of evil, right? Evil isn't about some guy with a mustache sitting there making awesome speeches for a crazy crowd or stormtroopers marching in lockstep down a thing. Evil is some guy who's trying to fill out paperwork who wants to feed their family, and not be shot, and then doing terrible things and having to make those decisions. Stuff that's pretty deep thematic stuff. I love those kind of games. They do make some people feel very uncomfortable because they're like, oh wow, I can relate to this. I could do that. Some people call it politically correct. I think that's BS. I think that's just art. I'm not interested in making those games on myself. I'm a little bit more broad-minded, but I'm glad those kind of games exist. Lap dance.
Hey, no, I just wanted to ask, since it's one of the YouTubers that Extra Credits created a video that talks about the difference between a punching and a challenging game. So in your design, in your experience, how do you differentiate if the game that they're creating now is too punishing, or is it just a challenging one? So how do you balance it out, and how do you determine if it's either one of the two?
Oh, I like it. All right. So is everybody familiar? Who's familiar with Extra Credits? Not that many. Okay. There's a column. I guess it's by now it's a YouTube column. But there's an online digital magazine called The Escapist, which I highly recommend. It's a magazine about digital games, but they're broad. They cover gaming. They cover gaming very broadly, and they talk in great depth about many gaming issues that there are. And if this kind of stuff interests you, definitely watch it. So in there, there's a couple of series. One is called Zero Punctuation, which is it's kind of funny. I like it, at least used to. And then there's Extra Credits, which is a really well done. I want to call it workshop. It's a one-sided workshop on different gaming topics. So watch it. That's cool. That's not the answer to your question. The answer to your question was challenging versus punishing. I'm not sure if I buy 100% into their criteria for it, but luckily this is a very new field. It's a little bit subjective. I'm going to redefine challenging versus punishing just on my own terms, and you guys can definitely feel free to agree, disagree. So punishing is, whether it is challenging or punishing, it sounds semantic, but it is a meaningful difference. A game that's punishing is essentially something that's built around negative reinforcement. Are you guys, if you guys are familiar with basic psychology, there's the principle of how to reinforce an action, whether you communicate to somebody whether their action was was desired or not desired. You can do that through positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement. Positive here. I'm going to put it in baby speak because this is a lecture. It's a lecture. It's a talk, and it's not a university lecture. The two examples are like, I like the way you complimented me. Here's a candy. I don't like the way you complimented me. Here's a smack in the face. Right. That's the super simple version of it. So games that are punishing rely purely on negative reinforcement. We don't want you to do this in a game, or we just as a function of playing this game, we want you to feel bad at periodic points. There are games that do that. There are absolutely games that do that. There's something called some game designers, and there may be me actually, I may have started this, called the Axl Rose principle. And if anybody knows Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose, the lead singer of Guns N' Roses, back in the 80s, is this a all ages crowd? Yeah, sorry. So he used to abuse his fans verbally, often on stage, and he in fact sometimes would pee on them. That's how it worked. And by doing that, they loved him even more. It was a really awful reverse. It was a very awful Pavlovian reaction, or there's a lot of psychological conditions you can attach to that. But because he did terrible things to them and they liked him for that, they were like, I can do bad things and they'll still like me, right? There's a school of game design that out there that believes that if I make games that just make you feel bad all the time, that makes sure you can't succeed or give you negative stimulus or that stuff, and you'll keep coming back to it. And unfortunately, they're borne out by the way. People do pay for those games, and the more punishing they are, that's it. That's fine. I do believe in punishment in games. I absolutely do. I do believe in negative reinforcement in games. We don't want you to act in a particular way, so we're going to put in a mechanism that will actually make you feel pain for doing that. Generally, it's heavy-handed. I try not to do it too much, but I will. Like if I have a really simple, elegant game and there's a natural exploit in there that can be defeated by other players, but I'd rather not have other players have to police them. I might throw in a little punishment for that player who does it. I try not to do that often, so I don't have a huge number of examples for it. Usually, if games are about points, it'll usually be negative points or something that puts you in a death spiral of losing the ability to continue getting negative points. Challenging is a whole other thing, though. Challenging is the weight of the decisions that you have to make in a game. And that's really difficult because I can't actually say, is a game challenging or punishing? Because there's a spectrum of skill and dedication among your players that is huge. So I consider Blood Rage a challenging game. The decisions are challenging in that game. I have seen on the lower end of the dedication spectrum how much people want to dedicate themselves to making interesting and deep tactical decisions. People who are lower end of that scale, they don't like the game. It's hard. It hurts them. They make bad decisions and they get punished for it. Because from social pressure, like, oh man, you screwed me up, you screwed me over here, you shouldn't have made that choice. Anybody play Puerto Rico, the board game? So that's a great example. Puerto Rico is a Euro game where you guys are, it's a great game by the way, play it, definitely play it. It's a good introduction into heavy Euro games. It's a game where you guys own plantations and you're trying to get victory points by planting corn with brown corn as tokens, and ship it or something. There's a bunch of different roles in there that you can take. There's a dynamic in that game where people choose what role they want to take for that turn. It gives them a bonus, and it gives everybody else a minor bonus. And then somebody else will take a turn, and then that role's not available for anybody else that round. There's a dynamic in that game because of how that works is because everybody's benefiting from every action, it's very easy for social pressure to take over, and I take a role that I think is good for me, and all the information's out there for everybody to see. Some players will say, no, dude, don't take that, that's awful. It's gonna be a bad decision because X, Y, and Z. Is that challenging or is that punishing? If we apply social norms and we apply that player's experience, it's punishing. If we go objective, if we go purely objective and look at it as look at game design purely in terms of game theory, it's probably challenging to the middle end of the dedication spectrum. So that was a really long way of saying I don't necessarily subscribe to challenging versus punishing. I think that's a little bit too simple a way to look at it. I like the fact that two terms exist, but I think we're only at the very, very beginning of how we understand how those terms work in games.
All right, great answer. The man here in the middle. Oh,
Hi.
The moderator, I love it. You get edited too.
There was an interview you did, I think it was a few years ago.
Uh-oh.
It was with Team Covenant, I think. Okay, there was this interesting bit you said about you reaching at one point wherein you deleted all your files. I mean, you cleaned up your computer. I think it has been like a few years back. So right now, where are you compared to that point? And how's the dynamic between coming up with an idea when you know that it was one of those things that you've deleted before?
God, I love these questions. You're a good group. I want to take another picture. So you basically just invited me to tell another story because not everybody's heard this story.
That's a setup.
It's set up. Whatever you're paying, he needs more. So so I was talking about a couple of years ago, God, 3 years ago at this point. And this is actually going to hook back into burnout. So it's all interrelated. About 3 years ago, I think it was, I go to game conventions every year, at least 3 or 4 really big ones. I was at a big game convention in Germany called Essen that has like 120,000 people. Gaming's huge everywhere in the world, especially in Germany. It's a huge convention. It's like the hall there in Toycon would be one of 11 of their halls. It's crazy. Every company in the world is there. There are tons of games. If you guys want to make the flight to Essen, I recommend it. It's a great show. You learn a lot about. You're not going to get to do a lot of gaming, but you'll get to see a lot of what the game scene is like. And Germany has really good beer. So I was at that convention, and at every convention, the last day, I'm always working. I do a lot of meetings, do a lot of signings, I interact with fans a lot, but I always take a few hours to go look at games. Just go walk the hall and take a look at what's out there. I have a lot of insider industry knowledge of what's coming out there, but I don't catch everything. So I want to see if there's any cool surprises. So I remember this one year in Essen, I was walking along the hall. I was kind of like, it's boring. I was bored by everything. And I was like, there's no good games out there. And that really bothered me. I went back to the hotel that night. It really bothered me that was like at the biggest game convention in the world with thousands of games out there. That my reaction was that I was just bored. We're now in a golden age of gaming. A golden age of gaming. You should buy lots of games from them. It's true though. I mean, we are at a golden age. Games have never been better than they were. They've never been better balanced. They've never been more colorful. They've never had better components. So it's like, if games are so good right now, why on earth am I bored? So, I mean, I concluded from that, right, wrong, or indifferent, that I was burned out. I was pretty darn burned out with gaming in general. So that's one of those occasions where I was burned out. So, I was like, well, I've dealt with burnout before, usually on small cases. The best way that I could think of was to do a little bit of a purge. So I threw all the games away that I'd ever been working on away from my computer, deleted the files, got rid of them, got rid of the cloud, threw my prototypes, threw them all in the garbage. Now, I'm not an insane person. I don't think. There's a psychological condition, and I don't remember what it actually is called, but you do actually pay a mental tax for every idea that you've got, for every project, every idea that you have that you're thinking about, but not actualizing on. This works for everything, by the way, not just games, not just creative things. It's one of the reasons why a lot of these self-help books of like how to manage your blah 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 blah. They always say Get stuff done. Make a list, get stuff done. And don't let stuff linger on that list. If the reason being, because even when you're not consciously thinking about it, in the background, it is actually occupying your higher cognitive functions. It's actually taking up quote unquote space, as we understand it, that to mean. So I had on my computer at the time, I think something like 500, 600 different games in varying stages. Prototype, like games that, clever mechanics that I thought would make a decent game, games that were largely put together, games that I kind of given up on, put on the shelf. Tons and tons of games. I just didn't finish them for one reason or another. And I was realized like I have all these games I'm thinking about that I'm sort of kind of working on. I don't know if I'm going to do anything with these. I'm not that excited about even thinking about getting back to work on them. So without looking at them, the key is without looking, without going back to my computer and looking at every file. Because as soon as I did, regret and fear of missing out would get in there. So I just went to my computer, whoop, gone. Dropbox, gone. You can't find it. The internet is not forever. It's gone. Every one of them is gone. My prototypes are on fire somewhere in Istanbul. I don't know. They're gone. I was so relieved because I didn't remember most of these things. I was so relieved. I remember the plane ride home from that show. I designed like 3 games. The easy part. I designed the easy part of 3 games right there on the plane. Ideas I've never had before. Concepts I've never had before. It felt really fresh. Now, funnily enough, none of those games are actually going to get published. I put them back on the computer. But I was having lots of cool, fresh ideas. And fresh interest, too. I was actually more interested in playing games. Like, I was starting to get a little burned out of even playing new stuff, too. So I don't know if I'd recommend this so much, because it is a kind of insane thing to do. And I've had my peers, many of my friends and peers have said, no, dude, you're insane. You're simply insane. It's like you took money and flushed it down to a well. I don't subscribe to that, but that's what I do. I definitely suggest don't let stuff fester too long. If you have an idea, just work on it. Work on it, do it, or don't. Put it away. Work on something else. I know a lot of people, especially at conventions, I do a lot of talks like this. A lot of people are like, oh, there's this game I've been thinking about making. How do I start making it? The answer is always make it. Just make it. Do it. Get it on paper. Get it out there. It's going to be terrible. It is going to be bad. Guaranteed. Right? Even if you think it's really good, that's Dunning-Kruger effect. That just means you're not good enough to know that it's bad. It's bad, but that's okay. All games suck until they don't. I hate all my games until they're done, basically. And they're done because I don't hate them anymore, which is a little fuzzy logic there, but I'm sticking to it. So where am I now on those? So I have about 100 and some files still on my computer, but it's not 500, and it's all new stuff. I actually did exhume one file from one game from my memory that I found a co-designer for, a friend of mine from the States that we're going. Somebody I've always respected and admired, and we're going to work together on it. He's actually got the prototype right now. And it's going to turn into something. But I reduced it from a almost finished game back down to just an idea. And I went back to him and said, I have this idea, I don't know where to go with it. And boom, collaboration. So every game that you see from me this year nope, that's not true. After the games that are coming out of Gen Con, those are the last ones that I've been working on before that period. Every game after that will be from since I threw all my stuff away. Blood Rage and the others were from before that period, but those 2 games were part of the reason that I threw my other stuff away. After I made Blood Rage, I was like, I'm not going to make another game this good for a long time, so I'm not going to make any more Blood Rage-like games. Except that's a lie. I'm actually working on one right now, but it's going to be different. And that's the answer to that.
Okay, the man in the middle. There, behind you. Hi. I've got a couple of questions based on everything you've said so far.
Uh-oh. 2 questions means 2 stories, by the way.
Well, 2 of the questions might be legal.
Okay.
One of the legal questions I'd like to ask might not be legal, but we haven't seen anything in BGG about it. Does The Godfather allow multiple player powers?
If multiple player powers, do you mean...
Different player powers.
Do you mean players start with different powers at the beginning of the game, or
Yes.
the game powers, they do not start with different powers at the beginning of the game? Trust me, it serves the game much better.
Okay. So the second question I'd like to ask is, are you planning to develop considering that Descent already has an app for the Overlord, and XCOM has an app on its own, are you considering that the others will have an app also?
Okay, I'm gonna, no. But, that's a really simple answer. No, it is not going to have an app. But, I'm sure a lot of you guys don't know this. So, are all of you guys familiar with Descent? Descent is a... God, I love this room. Okay, a few weren't. So just Descent is a big box game from Fantasy Flight Games. Kevin Wilson, who's my co-designer on one of the prototypes we're playing here today. It's a D&D in a box. It's really, really fun. One player plays the game master who's like trying to kill all the other players. The rest of the players are, the game master controls the monsters. Other players control heroes that go through the dungeon. The others is a game that I'm working on that is coming out later this year. Hopefully at Gen Con, maybe not. It's a horror game. It's a sort of existential horror game with that's based on corruption and redemption and all those cool things. Werewolves, demons, and stuff. Those are the good guys. Versus technically embodiments of the 7 sins of the apocalypse. So you were asking if I was going to make an app that lets you that takes the place of the Overlord, the player controlling the sins. Because Descent recently made an app that takes over that. So the answer is absolutely not. The reason being that my philosophy when designing games is I'm not really a big fan of games that do lots and lots of different things or have lots of different ways to play, and they're all kind of okay, because they usually have to make too many compromises to play lots of different ways. I'm a fan of games that have chosen a way to play, that this is the way you play this game, it's the only way you play this game, but this game, this is the best possible way I can imagine to play this game. It does this one thing that does it really well. So my thought is if the Sins player, during the design process of the others, if the Sins player, the big bad Overlord, if it could have been replaced by an AI, I would have used an AI, not even put the Overlord in the game. The fact that the Overlord is a person that you're playing against a human mind is so integral to that game. It's part of the asymmetrical nature of that game. So one of the things that makes the others a horror game is that all the heroes have open information. Everybody knows that you know all their powers, there's nothing that they can hide from anybody else. They can communicate with each other and all that stuff. The others player, the Sins player, has all hidden information. He knows everything. And he actually, ironically, I don't like spilling the secret, but it's a horror game. So the way that when you look at the table, if you're walking past the others at a convention, you look at the heroes, you're like, you look at them and you look at the board, you're like, aren't those guys screwed? And the heroes will be like, yeah, we're totally screwed. Even though it looks like they may be getting close to winning, they always feel like they're screwed. It's overwhelming, it's punishing. It's like heroes feel like they are on the receiving end of a Wes Craven movie all the time. However, the Overlord, the Sins player, I've played a lot of these one versus many games, one player versus many, and I know that there's a couple issues with that. One player usually, if they have ultimate power, they feel the need to be restrained. They don't want to, because they don't want to ruin their friend's good time and stuff like that. I was like, no, I want them to be able to go all out. I want to make them have to go all out. So the reason why all the Sims players info is hidden, even though they've got overwhelming odds, I designed it in such a way, balanced it in such a way that the Sims player doesn't have enough. It doesn't have the ability to do enough. So they always feel like they're screwed. If you walked on the other side of that table and said to the Sims player, it's like, how are you doing? It's like, I'm totally screwed. I don't know how I'm going to beat these guys. That's one of the. It's a really tough balancing act, and the game is very, very delicate. Really delicate. Like if you don't like games that can just come out of nowhere, or your character heroes can just die in one shot. And you can walk into a room, step into fire, and they're just dead instantly. It happens. It can happen. The fact that that can happen, the fear that that can happen, is absolutely amazing. The Sims player controlling monsters, they can be killed off in one hit by one player who coordinated just right. The Sims player should always be feeling fear that the players are going to do exactly the right thing, and there's nothing they can do about it. AI, nobody builds an AI to please the AI. Nobody cares how the AI feels. But you really got to feel like you're playing against a person, like you're playing against a malevolence, rather than you're playing against whether you're playing a set of instructional code. So, no app.
Okay, so that's 6 words for you, huh? Shut up and take my money. Okay.
After the show.
The last 2 questions are about you.
Last 2 questions?
Yeah, for my last 2 questions.
How many more stories do I get? All right, I get more stories.
Do you favor, when you make games, do you favor longer games or shorter games? And market-wise, which one would you favor, longer or shorter?
No. All right, so serious answer. So the first one, yes, was actually a serious answer. I like long games. I also like short games. At the end of the day, I want a game that pays off the user promise. So I love Double by Asmodee. I think it's called Spot It in English. A stupidly simple game of pattern recognition. Count little round cards on the tin. You look, find the object on the thing, like, oh, it's web. I found it. It takes 5 seconds to play. Stupidly fun. I love playing with my family. I love to play it to warm up the game night. Perfect for its length. It fulfills the user promise of intense, dumb fun. Love it. I love Flood Rage with 5 players. It takes 2 hours. It's intense. It takes a long time to play, but it's epic. It pays off all that effort you put into the game by requiring you to put all that effort into the game. So you feel that much better when you pull off the Frigga's Domain Sea Serpent combo and you get 1,000,000 points from recycling your boat out of Valhalla. You feel like you earned that because you put 2 hours into the game. If I made a game that was 30 minutes long and had combos like that, you just feel like it was random. There was no proper setup for it. That payoff is big. So I like games of all game lengths. I want to design games of all game lengths. I generally design mostly big box games because there's a bit of a snowball effect in publishing. I've had many successful games that take a long time to play, ergo publishers want me to make more of those because they've been successful and that's what the fans want. I've had to fight against that a little bit. I've 3 prototypes, I think, here, that none of which take longer than 45 minutes to play. One of them takes like 20 minutes to play, super fast. I do have a hard time designing games that are like Double. I actually can't design a game like Double. I envy people who can design games like that. I mean, I can come up with ideas that are like that. I can come up with games that are like that, but I don't think they would be very good. I don't think they'd be better than Double, so I won't publish them. Market-wise, yes, definitely the market trends towards shorter games. The broader the game, the more people you want to hit, the shorter it should be. But there is absolutely such a thing as too short. One of the most popular board game of all time, it's Monopoly. But never mind Mattel, take Mattel and Hasbro out of the picture. Most popular board game of all time is Settlers Catan. So take Settlers Catan out of the picture. Most popular board game of all time is Ticket to Ride. That's a 45-minute game, possibly an hour-long game. If you play Ticket Ride Europe or India, is it India? I don't know which one it was. Some of them can take longer than that. It's not a short game. Now, 45 minutes, remember, for people who don't normally play board games, who don't play hardcore board games, that's an eternity. Like, that's an episode and a half of Whose Mother Is This Anyway? Whose Mother Is This? How I Met Your Mother. There we go.
It's a spin-off.
Sorry, Whose Line Is It Anyway? See, I just smashed up 2 shows. Greater process. Right, that's 2 episodes of an awesome sitcom on YouTube where they don't have commercials. Like, that, but it wouldn't be a satisfying game if it took less time. So, generally from design principle, to re-answer another question from over here, I don't generally want to put artificial restrictions on my games. I'd like them to be X amount of time for maybe commercial reasons. Like, this is a 60-minute game, sure. But what I really mean is I want this game to feel like it took 60 minutes to play. Even if it takes 2 hours to play. If you feel like, oh, I felt like I played this for an hour, that was cool. I follow exactly the same logic as filmmaker logic. Right? The filmmaker, if you go to film school, which I did, one of the strongest rules in film is your movie should end 5 minutes before the audience wants it to end. Not 5 minutes after, 5 minutes before. Right? Always leave wanting more is the old Dick Van Dyke's thing. But the rule is try to end about 5 minutes before the audience actually wants it to end. Leave them hungry. Leave them like, oh my God, why couldn't there be more? I cleverly phrase that for gaming. Your game should end 1 turn before your audience wants it to. Innovator. I mean, it seems arbitrary and all that stuff, but you understand the spirit. So that's it. That's the only thing. All I care about is I care about perceived time rather than actual time. I know that. Godfather is that's coming out next year. It is. For a long time, I struggled with that game because it's everybody that I played with when it was finished. They loved it. They absolutely loved the game. Now, while I was playtesting, they hated it. It sucked. But when it's finished, I played with tons of groups that love it. But it was always a 2-hour game. Always 2 hours. And I was trying to make a game artificially. It was like I want this game to be like Lords of Waterdeep, not mechanically, but I wanted to feel like that kind of experience. But it was always 2 hours long, always. And then I was like, I applied my own logic, and I was like, I asked people who play, it's like, so how long do you think you were playing? Like, 60, 90 minutes. Like, all right, game's fine, it's good. We're gonna write 2 hours on the box. It scares me a little bit, but it's satisfying. It earns its 2 hours. It doesn't peter out, so it's 2-hour game.
Okay, at least that explains why. So you don't like games with large downtime?
Yes, I don't like. Okay, that's another story. I don't know if I can get 3 stories in a row. But if somebody else asks about downtime, I'll tell stories about downtime. I do have a complicated opinion about downtime.
Okay.
Hi, Eric.
Hello.
Hello. I just wanted to ask because there has been a trend recently of board game designers moving over to the computer stage, and there has been 2 very successful releases so far. First is Gupta, who did Twilight Struggle. He was lead designer for XCOM, and Ed Beach, who was the lead designer for Here I Stand, did the expansions for Civilization 5, and he's going to be the lead designer for Civ 6 coming out in October. So my question is, have you ever considered doing a move to the full computer gaming design space, and do you see yourself making such a transition?
So you guys heard that question? So a lot of board game designers have been made successful moves into the digital field. Would I consider doing that? So spoiler alert, I've been working on digital for over a year. I've been working on a digital trading card game called Duelist with a Y. It's quite successful at this point. I love it. I'm still working on it. It's been in beta for 1,000 years. I don't even know at this point. It's been in beta for a long time. for a company that's made out of mostly ex-Blizzard employees, and everybody knows I love me some Blizzard. I love that they have the Blizzard attitude. This game, we're going to polish this game and polish it and polish it and polish it until it's done. And we don't care how long it's in beta. So I have been working on that. Now, I don't want to move to digital. My heart is in tabletop games. Duelist to a degree is my day job, but as a day job, I'm only the designer. I don't work in an office. I work on my own, and I have a team that I work with. It gets X% of my time because my contract says I get X% of my time. It actually gets 3X of my time because I love the game, and I couldn't imagine doing less. But I would be sad, honestly, really sad if it ended up taking all my time, or if like they asked me, do I want to design more games? And of course, I have tons of ideas for digital games. I'd love to do. There's a bunch of really cool things I want to do. Here's a free one if anybody wants to make it. I want to play Diablo in 5 minutes. I want to do games that essentially encapsulates the Diablo experience, but in 5-minute chunks, like as fast as I play Hearthstone, competitively with other players. For money, I make money. All right. Go. But I want to make tabletop games. I have lots and lots of unfinished business in tabletop, and there's at least, I don't know, 20 or so games I want to do before I become irrelevant.
All right, next question. At the back.
Hi.
Hello.
How do you design a game such that it will have a high replay value? That is, people would want to come back playing it after they've played it once.
How do you design a game with high replay value so people want to play it again? Make it fun. No? All right. I'm going to edit your question a little bit if you don't mind. Because there's actually a emerging school of thought in game design. This is relatively new, by the way, which I'm really happy with because I've been asking this question for a long, long time. The question is, does a game always want to be replayable and why? And that answer is not always yes. I don't actually think all games should be replayable. And I think now we're going to get to a point, this is my opinion only, I do not speak on behalf of publishers, blah, 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 blah. I believe that gaming experience needs to be compelling, and there are many ways for a game experience to be compelling. Show of hands, Pandemic Legacy, anybody played that? Anybody played it again after they finished it? You're lying.
I played in 2 campaigns.
There you go. You bought 2. There you go. So, extraordinarily compelling game. Not replayable. It's extraordinarily compelling because it's not replayable. And of course, it sold a ton of copies. So, I'm sure every game designer that you've ever heard of who's ever thought about making a game is thinking about making a legacy game at this point, which is why I'm not. But of course, you're going to see many more of this, and there's many ways to express that. So, to answer your question, how do I make a game replayable? I only make a game. Replayability is one factor of a successful game, and I do put thought into. I do put some consideration into it because I consider replayability a spectrum rather than a switch. A game is replayable or it is not. I don't believe it's true. How replayable is the game and why? So it's going to get a little boring and technical. I apologize, but it can't be all stories. There's 2 ways to make a game replayable. One is through, well, not really. There's one way. It's variance, but there's many ways to express variance in a game. How one instance of a game is different from the next instance of the game. There's overt and there's subtle, right? That's a big way. But there's overt variance is in games like Dominion, where Dominion took that and like ground it down to a nub and said like, I'm just going to say that I'm going to make 25 cards and you're all going to play 10 of them. And all these cards interact in different ways, ergo, replay. It says it right on the box. It should have been called Replay the Card Game. I know the designer, right? He's a great guy, right? He's crazy OCD, and we all are to a degree, but he's crazy OCD, and he was like, I want this game to be so replayable that it punches you in the face with its replayability. Right? And it does. There's a card that wasn't in the set that's called I Punch You in the Face. And it does something different every time. I may not be telling the truth. That's overt replayability. The game state varies, right? Blood Rage has some overt replayability. The overt replayability there is the way the pillage tokens come out. They come out in a different province every time, and the combo of pillage means that different provinces or different clusters of provinces are valued differently by different players. It's not like Dominion where the character of the game does not completely change. It doesn't leave out chunks of the game for that. There's ways to do it in cards. It's like, so if you're playing a card game, all card games where you draw cards out of a deck and if you don't draw every card out of the deck, they are absolutely replayable through the variants. You haven't seen every card in this particular game, that's it. Even the card games where you do draw every card out of the deck, as long as that deck is shuffled, the order in which they come out is going to make the game different in result. It's going to make one game different to the next. As long as there's variants of any kind, the game is actually replayable. Go, believe it or not, is replayable. If I were to design Go today, however, and put it on Board Game Geek, who I'm sure you guys are familiar with, I'm sure I would get a rating of 6, not replayable. Symmetrical starting position, no variable player power, so boring. It is an infinitely replayable game, but it relies on, I mean, it was a community design game, but it relies on, it actually relies on human brain function to be replayable, right? It requires that it is more difficult to parse a game state than you can do it in one time, so eventually you decide you give up, and you give up trying to compute it all, and you plan X amount of moves in the future. That's it. So, thank you very much. Cheers. So that's it. So how do I make a game replayable? So when I was joking at first, make it fun. I wasn't actually joking. That is my answer. I care about making a game fun. I am working on a game. I have to be careful here because I don't know if it will. I'm working on a game that hasn't been sent to a publisher yet, so I can say this. I'm working on a game that you don't even play once. You don't even get to finish it. And that's part of what makes it fun. I think. We're playing it, it's a little nutty, but you don't get to finish it, and so far it's kind of playing well. And part of this is, I designed it as a thought experiment, but then I found a theme for it that I really liked. It's like, oh, this is coming together. I don't care about replayability at all in that game, but I think if it plays out if it survives stress testing as well as I think it's going to, I think it's going to sell really, really well, and I think it's going to deliver really good value for the money. That's that.
We'll take some questions from the front.
Ask for just a few extra seconds while I do this.
Okay.
All right, hi. I'm just curious about the other aspects of the design of the game. How much influence do you have over the visual direction of the games that you design? Like, what's the relationship like between you and the art director or the artist?
Story time. So, I love the question. How much influence? So, I'm gonna have to edit your question a little bit because I can't speak for all game designers. So I can say, how much influence do I have over stuff? I'm a little bit of a unique case. I've been a game designer who's publishing their very first game, probably not gonna have the same experience. So I'll speak for myself in this case only. I do actually have a lot of influence over the art direction, but in subtle ways. So, except for licensed games. Some license, for Godfather, for example, I had zero influence whatsoever. Zero. My producer is Italian. I was like, at one point, I actually, I remember, he's going to hate that I told the story, but I don't care. At one point, I remember he said, all right, we have to add some characters to this, just to fill out some holes. So I need you just to give me some character ideas. So I'm like, of course, I love the Mafia. I'm going to make up some character ideas. I sent some in, including the characters I thought were really cool, right? Some really cool little visual hooks and stuff like that. And I heard nothing for like a couple days. And not junior actually, well, the producer that was working on the game under him, I was like, so what happened? What's going on? He's like, all I heard was from the other office that I have sewer taste. Which is, I guess, an Italian way of saying no. He's Italian, he grew up on mafia movies, he gets it. I mean, he gets it down to the bone. I neither have nor deserve any right to have influence over the art direction of that game. It's going to look amazing. It's designed by the art design is by Carl Kapinski, who worked for Games Workshop, and we worked on Woods. He's just awesome. If you guys look at on before you get the cover of that, it looks like a movie poster. It's not. It is an original cover done by Carl. It's great. All the art's going to be that caliber and that quality. For Blood Rage, I actually had a lot of influence. I had developed a really good relationship with Adrian Smith, who is the single artist of that game. My relationship with Adrian Smith's entry into the project was actually part of why I'm doing the game for Cool Mini or Not. So once upon a time, I was in Singapore. I love this part of the world, by the way. I go to Singapore and Malaysia very often. I was in Singapore visiting my producer, David Purdy, the same guy who told me I have sewer taste. This was years before. I was visiting him. You guys remember the Iceland volcano from many, many years ago? There was a volcano in Iceland and it killed all traffic. Well, I was in Singapore and I couldn't get home. And he was like, oh, let's stay at my place. So I stayed at his place, and I was showing him some ideas that I had, including Blood Rage was at the time. I want to do Vikings. And I had some ideas for what I want to do for art and stuff, and I wasn't used to big budget art. And he's like, I want to do this game. You and me are going to do this game together. I was like, well, okay, but I actually want to do it with a really big publisher. I want to do AAA value, have really good miniatures like that. He goes, I have a personal relationship with Adrian Smith. Adrian Smith will do all your art if you do a game with me. I was like, okay, done. So Adrian Smith is an amazing artist. He also worked for Games Workshop. He was on the cover of Horus Heresy, Realm of Chaos for Warhammer 40K. He did a bunch of Magic cards. He's an amazing artist. English, great chap. So he and I, he's also one of those artists that doesn't like to be directed too much. He has got vision, he knows what he wants. So it's my favorite way to direct is not to over-direct, just to inspire at all. So we work together a lot, and my producer, David Preddy, actually he puts most of it together. He has most of the original ideas for how the visuals are going to look. So he came out with a plan. I had to give him all the content, but I know there's going to be 5 different plans. There were 6 at the time, but we're going to do 5 different plans. They all need to look different. I want it to be fairly authentic, but not too authentic, et cetera, et cetera. And Adrian Smith is a metalhead, as am I. I'm a big fan of Viking metal. I love it. And at one point, I told Adrian that I was like, Adrian, you have the exact same name as the lead guitarist of Iron Maiden. I just want to make sure A, you're not the same person, because they're both from England. And B, do you like Iron Maiden? And his response was like, yeah, they're okay. I just like my metal a little dirtier. I was like, all right, we're going to work well together. And so all we did, when we just talked on Skype, we spent a bunch of time talking on Skype about our favorite metal bands. And at one point I was like, all right, dude, I'm not going to give you any art descriptions at all. I'm just going to give you a playlist. I'm going to send you off my favorite Viking metal bands and my favorite Viking metal songs. Just listen to these, make stuff, see what happens. That's pretty much where that went, and that's Blood Rage. For those of you who are curious, the Blood Rage cover is brought to you by Amon Amarth versus the World, which is a cool,
That's my favorite
right?
Connection.
Right? Yeah, great record. They had me at roar. That's what I can do. Somebody gets candy. All right, so now every project is completely different. I'm doing another game with David Preddy and Adrian Smith and Mike McVeigh, the same team that did Blood Rage. We're doing it. All right, that's enough. My show. I'm doing another game with the same team. The band's getting back together. We're doing another game with that. I mean, we're not doing it to metal music, but it's the same thing. So I have a lot of influence with them. With some, I have. There are some games that I have less than zero influence. For example, XCOM. I knew that. I mean, I'm a big fan of this series. I had no idea. When you're working on licensed games, you don't always know what you have access to. I didn't even know what art we were allowed to use, what assets we were allowed to use. There was a producer working at FFG at the time who was also a programmer, who also programmed the app based on my design spec. Amazing, talented girl. I just basically said, all right, I had to guess what we're going to see, because I was a big fan of XCOM, so I'm like, we're going to put this 120% of stuff into the box, use whatever we're allowed to use. Any combination of these will work. They gave me all of them though, so that was even cooler. But I didn't know. Until I saw the final beta, I had no idea what art was going to make it in and what it was going to look like. When it comes to graphics, I have a huge amount of influence because I'm a pain in the ass. I'm a UX, so somebody asked me about digital. I worked on digital for a long time. I actually worked on digital for 7 years before this. It's just that this, 8 years before this. This is just the first time I shipped. You want more stories, they're there. But I spent a lot of time on user interface in video games. I'm very, very fussy about how information is presented to players. All I care about is form, right? I have no talent. There's anybody who's you saw I signed the Blood Rage thing. That Viking thing that I drawn it. That's the extent of my artistic talent. But I'm really, really fussy about make sure that everything is in what I consider the right place. That it is formed, function first, not formed. So the Blood Rage player boards, for example, how they're laid out that was me, like 100%. I was like, it's got to be laid exactly like this because I want the board to explain the entire game to you. Once you know the game, I want you to never have to look at the rule book again. Look right there, there it is. Now the graphic designer has to take that really restrictive wireframe stuff and work with that and make it pretty. Because what I work on is not pretty at all. So I have to, which means I also have to, but the hidden bonus is, because I have all these crazy restrictions, they have to hire the most talented graphic designers to overcome those restrictions. See, Darwinism. I'm very lucky that I can do that. A lot of game designers, I'm sure, don't have any. Like some game designers don't have any influence on the theme, for example. I know many designers who've designed a game, they thought the theme was really cool, the publisher's like, that's nice, I like your game, your theme, we're gonna make it about bubblegum instead. Right? Bubblegum is kind of cool, right? It may not have been the designer's original idea, but there it is. Some designers have worked for games with artists they don't like. That's how it goes. It is, at the end of the day, it is and should be the publisher's call. I just happen to have I work with a lot of publishers that have a very good, that have a higher amount of respect for the two-way street. You guys, when you guys come down later, you're going to see a game called Secrets. Do we have that here? We have Secrets here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a game that I designed with a co-designer, Bruno Fazuti, for a company called Repo. So the same guys that did Seven Wonders and stuff. Great publisher. They actually changed our theme. We gave it to them with one theme, and they changed it to another. And we like their theme way better. It fits our. It actually. We changed based on the theme change they gave us. We made modifications to the game because we're like, oh my god, yes, it's obviously a better theme, and the game is smoother now because of it. And the art style they put on it, 100% theirs. They were like, we're going to pitch you something. Here you go, and we love it. So I had no control over it, and I'm glad I didn't. I have more stories, but that's all I'll give for now. But hopefully that answered.
All right. The man over here.
Right. Hello. Yeah.
That was more story for hello.
I'd like to ask, what are your opinions on game expansions or second seasons?
I like expansions, but you know who likes expansions more than me? I mean, again, so I'm going to treat expansions the same way I treat replayability. Yes, but of course not for everything. I'm a big fan. When I'm working on a game fairly early on, before I get too committed to how the game's going to be, I do want to know whether it's an expandable game or not. I'm not sure if I'm really supposed to say this, but like Godfather, for example, I designed no expansions. If we have to, if it sells 1 million copies, I'm going to get a knock on my door. They're going to go, dude, you're making an expansion. And I'm being like, all right, sure, yes. The money is correct, but I don't want to make expansions for it. I designed it to be a part of what makes that game as good as it is, in my opinion, is that it doesn't have expansions. Blood Rage has a very small number of expansions. I originally designed it to have no expansions. To start with, I'll be fully honest, I started thinking, okay, I have to make expansions for this because I know it's going to be a Kickstarter project, and those things always need expansions. But the way that I handled expansions for Blood Rage was very, very specific. So I started with a game that was, a lot of people know me for Chaos in the Old World, which is a game I did for Fantasy Flight, which I'm very, very proud of. It's actually more complex a game than I would make today. I love it, I'm still very proud of it, I won't change a thing. But if I had to design it today, it wouldn't be as complex as it is. And it wouldn't be as sprawling as it is. Blood Rage is a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more fine-tuned, and consequently a little bit more broad. And so, actually, I would say it's a lot more streamlined. And so, because of that, while I was working on it, I said, you know what? There are some interesting ways I can think of that can make this game, that can add depth to this game without ruining it, without just making it too sprawling. But I don't want to put them in the basic box. I want to let players choose whether they're going to add this piece of complexity or not. That's where Mystics came from, that's where Gods came from, and the other expansion we didn't finish, but which may come out, maybe. So that in that particular way, I was like, all right, yes, I did have expansions in mind, but I wanted to do very few, and that was for the, and it had a very, very specific reason for it. Some games have to have expansions, right? I'm not even allowed to have an opinion on it, right? The collectible card game, you know there's going to be expansions. My opinion on whether expansions are good or not are irrelevant. That's just how they work. I'm not even sure I have an opinion on it. I know if I make a collectible card game, it's got to have expansions. So when I'm working on a game, like respecting the medium, I will always work on the design of the game, knowing or making assumptions about whether and how expandable it's going to be, and that's going to inform the core design of the game. Will that help?
All right, next question.
Hello, Eric. When you're designing a game, do you always start with the theme? And for example, a board gamer like me would like to start designing games as well. Should I also start
with the theme as well, or maybe a mechanic in a game that, or I would like to expand. What should go first, the theme or the mechanics?
So this is one of the most asked questions I ever get. So tonight, first time ever, Filipino exclusive. Can you give him the mic back, please? Twist. Here's the twist. I'm gonna turn this back on you. Are you working on a game right now?
Kind of, yes.
Kind of, yes. Tell me about your game. Just tell me. Don't worry. There's no pressure, no judgment. I mean, Adrian's judging, but he's that kind of guy.
So I've been talking to a friend. It's a game about commuting. Here in the Philippines, we don't really have a good.
So it's impossible and punishing.
Well, basically, we want to try to express. How a player would like to, on his own, how he would try to do the transportation, how to plan it, how to. Something like that.
How to get from one place to another in a place like Manila, for example.
Yeah, for example.
So, you answered your own question. Your game is a theme. You started with a theme. In my experience, so there's a reason why I asked you that. I wasn't just trying to single out and punish you. I wanted to make this relevant to you, and because I really don't like answering that question in the abstract, and practical examples I find are much better. When you think about a game, the question is like, where do you start? Theme or mechanics? I actually think it's pretty irrelevant. You start where you start. You start with inspiration. That's it. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes somebody goes, here's a truck full of money, make a game, and they're like, well, that inspired you, right? That doesn't always happen. The game happens because you want it to happen. And so whether you start with whatever you start with, there's something that sparked that. There's a reason you made that game, which, to call back, you may have to throw away later. But where do you start? You start with a thing. Now, if you put a gun to my head and said, you have to answer this question or you don't get to leave the Philippines, then, actually I'd ask how much the rent is here. How much is the rent here? Maybe I wouldn't leave. No, okay, never mind. If you put a gun to my head, I would say you probably feed. And the reason why I say that is because mechanics are tools. I've never ever, in my life, I've never seen a single mechanic where somebody's like, where that you have to make this game, even like the rondel or something like you've seen from other games. When you describe Dominion, deck building is not a mechanic. It is a series of mechanics that come together to make a game, or part of a game. Mechanics are tools, and there are some clever ones, but there's no such thing as a bad mechanic. There is like, I've never seen a mechanic ever that is just, you can say, this mechanic is bad, meaning it's never going to work in anything. You can probably point to at least a dozen themes that are bad, which means that the scale of subjectivity applies to themes, which means that the things that attract people to games, which are subjectivity, are probably themed. So my guess is if you start with something in mind, right? Like Cowboys and Indians is a game that started with theme. It's a bad theme, but it started with theme. Generally, you start like there's a friend of mine, Matt Forbeck, that I do a lot of conventions with. He replaces the term theme with metaphor. And you're talking about commuting right now, which is perfect, right? That's a metaphor. For what? We can discuss later, perhaps with our therapists. But it's a game about commuting, right? And by the way, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great idea. I think you should make that game. You should go home and make it tonight. I'll even give you some feedback right now, right? So you told me what the theme is. Immediately in my head, I see a game, right? Immediately. It may not be the same game as yours, but because there's play in there, right? It may be a solo game. I don't know. It may be a cooperative game. It may be a violent game. If it was in LA, it would be a violent game. We don't know. But the idea is, like, I see challenge in there, I see player interaction in there, I see object interaction in there, I see a beginning, a middle, and an end. That, like, just from, it's a game about commuting in the Philippines. Done, I got it. Now, is it a commercial idea? Maybe it will be in the Philippines, probably not anywhere else. Story time. I had a game very much like what you're talking about. I start from the same source of inspiration as you're talking about. So I visit Thailand very often. I love Thailand, one of my favorite places, next to the Philippines. Easy applause. Comedy 101. I love Thailand, but how many of you have been to Thailand? How many of you have been to Bangkok? All right, maybe this would sell in the Philippines. I have this game. I have this game that is called Tuk Tuk. You guys know what Tuk Tuk is? Yes. All right. Have any of you guys tried taking a Tuk Tuk from one place to another to see a sight, to see an attraction? All right, see, that's how commercial this game is. The Tuk Tuk it's a wonderful little, environmentally horrible little three-wheeled vehicle with an engine made out of a Mad Max movie that you drive from, that you drive if you really hate your own sense of smell and all that stuff. But I love them. I think they're cool. Long story short, my brother and I went to visit Thailand a long time ago, and we were trying to get to the Grand Palace from our hotel to see the Grand Palace. We took a tuk-tuk. We left at 8 o'clock in the morning. We saw the Grand Palace at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Why? Because we went from one, our tuk-tuk driver was like, he wanted to make a lot of money, as all tuk-tuk drivers do. He decided, well, I'm just on the way, are you guys interested in you want to take a little detour, a scenic detour? We were like, well, it doesn't matter what we said. The script's in his head. Well, I'm going to take you over to, I'm going to take you to the store over here. It's really cool. Authentic Thailand, tailored. That's right. So he took us to a tailor shop. We looked around. It's like, that looks like a lot of silk. We came out and said, oh, so what did you buy? I'm like, nothing. Like, all right, don't worry. They took us to the Grand Palace. We went there. The guards told us, oh no, Grand Palace is closed. The king's sister died. It was very terrible. Like, there's people in there. I see people in there. There's somebody shopping in there. No, sister's dead. Very, very bad. Very bad. Don't worry. It'll open again in an hour. All right. So they took us, he said, oh, don't worry, I'll show you other sites. There are many other sites to see in this hour. Took us to another tailor shop. We came out, what did you buy? Nothing. Lather, rinse, repeat. Instant play pattern. Now, of course, it's Bangkok, it's hot, it's polluted, bad traffic. You wouldn't know anything about that. But we were really, really angry that day. At the end of that day, I was like, the guards at the Grand Palace told us, they lied to us and told us it was over. At the end of it, the driver let us off, he finally led us to the Grand Palace. He parked us a block away. I was like, can't you take us to the gate? He's like, no. Then, because I did finally buy a suit to shut him up. It was cheap. Not really. He took a block away from the guard to tell us, when we asked why, he's like, no, he will take all the money. He'll take all my money from the tailor. All your money from the tailor? Oh man, this thing goes all the way to the top, doesn't it? And it does. It is this elaborate conspiracy that covers every single, and I did some research on this, every single element of commercial Bangkok. Everybody's in on it. To fleece tourists who are not aware of the commercial underpinnings of that ecosystem. I was like, well, there's a game right there. I went home, designed it that night. It designed itself. I thought it was pretty fun. In my game, you guys are the racketeers. You are the tuk-tuk drivers. Each one of you is competitively trying to fleece tourists from their money before they become jaded and flip over to their other side and never ride with you again. Each one of those tourists is basically just a bag of money with a head. I use that as a metaphor. I thought that was pretty cool. I described the game, as I did to you, to many publishers. They said, they were like, oh, that's really cool. Can you make it about anything other than Thailand? Because we don't care. If there was this big a gaming market in Thailand as well as the Philippines, I probably sold that game by now. Doesn't matter. I think the game is cool. I have it. I play it with my friends. Definitely came from the theme. Was one of the few travel games I came up with.
Thank you.
All right. So we still have a lot of questions. You still have a lot of answers. All right.
42.
42. All right. Our next question will be from. Oh, sorry. I'm not. Okay. I think we have this guy.
Hi, Eric. This is Brian from Anki.
Hi.
Yeah. I usually teach games to patients who have mental and physical disabilities. And their
awesome.
Their
You're
favorite
awesome.
games are Dixit and Ticket to Ride.
That's fantastic.
It's becoming a like Groundhog Day for me each and every day I play those games. So, and I can't, as much as I want to put Blood Rage on the table, some of my patients are bipolar. So, in relation to game design, how can I design a game that caters to those types of clients?
Can you tell me a little bit more, if you can, about...
Okay, so I'm a psychiatric nurse.
Okay.
In a
Awesome
hospital.
job.
Yeah. So I actually have a...
I wasn't being sarcastic.
It's like an asylum, yeah. So there are a lot of patients who have mental disabilities like schizophrenia.
Hence, no blood rage.
Yeah. So I can't bust it out that easily. So yeah, some of the games are really simple. But some patients are like they're colorblind or they can only understand the pictures. So I want to design a game that can cater to most of the patients in there. So can you give me any tips?
So interesting enough, I mean, that's a great question, and I wish I could give you a satisfying answer. I'm going to try. So cognitive dysfunction is it's actually a pretty big topic for game designers because, in my opinion, game designers all have to study psychology. If all any of you guys, by the way, if you're planning to design a game, math, sure. You better be able to add. Anything else, you can do the long way. English, English or linguistics, absolutely. By far, number one, psychology. Understand why we do what we do, why we think what we think, how we react to stimuli, that's number one, 100%. Back to your question. So I was just reiterating why your job's awesome. And why I think you're probably more qualified to design games already than a lot of people who do it professionally. But cognitive, I'm done complimenting you, you can pay me after.
I'll meet you later.
So cognitive dysfunction is a really broad field. I don't think, and we, like as you know, of course, since you're studying it, right? We understand basic cause and effect for a lot of it, but we don't really understand. Our understanding of cognitive dysfunction still looks like a mind map, like the software. I don't think I think it's so broad that if I were to tell you this is how you design a game for people with cognitive challenges or dissociations or whatever, it would almost be as broad as to say this is how you design a game for women, right? Which I would say don't. The reason why, specifically the reason why, is because I believe that in the case of, let's say, let's go back to the gender thing, that any two individual women are more different from each other than they are the same as a gender. So there's there's not enough common thread to actually design to, right? Gamers are gamers. So generally, and I would go, the cognitive dysfunction are so wide, there's so many of them, right? I couldn't, if I took somebody who was colorblind, or took somebody with early onset dementia, or took somebody with obsessive defiant disorder, like blood rage with them, or even any level of OCD, which almost every gamer has to some degree. Me too. Don't worry, we're all in the same boat. Like those, every single one of those, and remember there's severity as well, right? There's somebody with severe OCD, or somebody with severe Asperger's, or somebody with high functioning autism. Totally different, right? They approach problems in a completely different way. So I couldn't say, this is how you would design a game for somebody like that. So what I would do is just go right back to the roots of how games challenge people, right? Or why games are fun. Games are fun because they provide challenge, because they provide interaction. By the way, you can break this, if you're Raph Koster, who wrote Theory of Fun, he believes that all fun translates to challenge. It's a great book, by the way, you might want to read that. It's Raph, R-A-P-H, Koster, Theory of Fun. I don't like the book at all, but I highly recommend it. Very worth reading. Raph Koster's a great guy. He's like a grand high preacher of gaming. You probably want to, there's another book called The Anatomy of Choice and The Anatomy of Challenge. You probably want to read those. Look it up. And just look at how people are challenged. What, because I mean, I could spend hours and hours and hours. Basically, the quick answer is just play games with them. I think the games that are good for you, that would be good for your field, already exist. What you need to do is you need to develop a selection criteria of how to find those games, and then another selection criteria of how to separate your patients into groups that will function with the same type of game, which is already hard, right?
Yes, it's really hard.
There's a reason why Bridge is one of the most popular games in old age homes, because it teaches partnerships. It's got partnerships, and it teaches, it exercises clue giving. Right, there's a term for it. It's getting late. I don't remember, but those two cognitive functions are actually one of the best indicators of dementia or not, and also autism. Interesting enough. We should talk later.
Yeah.
But they teach that because exercising that function does offset a lot of the problems with old age. So really all you're doing is you're trying to get them to exercise higher brain functions that keep them either keep them sane, I hate to say that, but, or at least make them feel included and happy and social by playing games. I think you probably want to aim toward the latter and not the former. So just basically find games and take them out, take out games that aren't appropriate, and then find the common ground rather than try to find games for them specifically.
Thanks, Eric. That's a great answer. Yeah. Is it okay? Can I ask one more question? It's for Bob.
I don't know. One question only. I gave this guy 17 questions in a row.
It's from a friend who can't make it, so he just texted.
Okay. Text questions. We're getting home.
Please bear with me. It's quite long. So
tell him he has to make it here if he wants to ask questions.
So here's the question, Eric. Wikipedia and Reddit sparked the rise of user-generated content, while Facebook and Twitter paved the way for social networking. It's so long. Revolution. This began as a simple concept that became milestones of the last decade. So, in that context, as a board game designer, what do you personally hope would be the cultural significance of board games and games in general 5 to 10 years from now, beyond merely being an enjoyable hobby? Okay, I'll change the question. When will you make a Euro game? When will you make a Euro game? That's my question.
It's a fascinating question because they were like, so tell them I'm going to dissect this question. Like there were two parts. And I'm trying to figure out how they relate because first I was like, oh, cool, dude. Like I want to attend your lecture. About Facebook and user-generated content and so I don't know how that relates to the second part, so I'm going to only answer the second part if that's all right.
Just read it.
Like there's a question there about user-generated content, which is a whole interesting thing on its own. But if the question is how do I feel board games are going to be relevant? they'll always be relevant. So, if I can, imagine if you will, a society that outlaws play in all forms. If written into their constitution is henceforth from this day, because they always write like that, henceforth from the founding of Blazistan, play shall be illegal and punishable by death. Just imagine that as written into a constitution. Imagine what, there's a point. Imagine going to junior training as a police officer for that state. How do you enforce that? Just try to picture for a second, how would you enforce that law? I'm hoping internally, your answer is, I have no idea, absolutely whatsoever. How do I enforce that? Because there's the concept of society, any type of society, without fundamentally understanding the concept of play is impossible. It's always, play is an absolute essential part of our makeup, right? We interact with each other in many different ways, but play is, regardless of language, religion, background, all that stuff, play is an implicit understanding that we're about to enter a safe space where we can either make up or follow a set of rules in order to achieve a goal, which is almost usually to have fun in an X, Y, or Z way. And then when it's done, we're out. Cool. So in that way, social games, so board games, all board games are doing is putting that in a box. Board games have been, if you guys look, anybody a history of anybody read about the history of board games? Anybody know what the first board game ever was? No? Hans? What was the first board game ever made? Well, it's a good answer, but no. Nope. After go. It was called. I'm not saying that again. The first board game ever made, literally. I mean, there's a. Wow, it's escaping me. You guys can. I'm sure you guys can Google this afterward. There's an exhibit at the Royal Ontario Museum, which is a worldwide exhibit, that shows civilizations right up to the 12,000 BC, crazy stuff. That have miniatures, little miniatures made out of hopefully soapstone, possibly bone, but they're miniatures. They're miniature representations of people on a board. I have no idea how that plays, but there are people on a board. What's the game called? I don't know. But that game, guaranteed, that game was play. And they've been playing games ever since. Like, this is not a fad, it's not a trend, it's not something that's going to go away. The medium may evolve over time, but the idea of tactical representations of a metaphor on a board is never going to go away, right? Unless we fundamentally change and become Skynet takes over, or the Mark aliens from South Park end up blah blah blah. And barring any of that, this isn't going to go away. So, taking that into account, I just think the idea of gaming as possible. There's a friend of mine, I wish I remember who it was, who came up with a great quote. And I can actually almost close this with this quote. I'm going to close it with a quote. Can I close it with a quote? Yeah, all right. I look forward to the day, which is coming very soon, where people who have just become acquainted and part of small talk, part of our regular small talk, a stranger getting to know each other. One of the questions, everybody knows what kind of questions we ask each other, like what do you do for work, what do you do, blah, blah, blah. The question nowadays is, do you play games? That's actually, games are as big a part of mainstream appeal, mainstream consciousness, that it often comes up in small talk. Do you play games? because many people do. I look forward to the day when the question becomes, what games do you play? Rather than what games do you game? As soon as that happens, I think we've arrived. And that future is probably in our lifetime, could even be the next 5-10 years. But I'll be here, hope you guys are too.
Yeah. All right.
Mic drop.
On that note. All right. On that note and on that quote. All right. On that quote, before we end this, no, we really had a great discussion, and I hope you all leveled up. Yeah. Oh my God. All right. I'd like to call on stage just to share a few reminders and about the state of board gaming in the Philippines. And some special announcements. The president and founder of Gaming Library, Mr. Hans Scanner.
More stories.
Story time.
Story time. So, again, I want to thank Eric and, of course, to everyone here, especially to friends. 5 years ago, actually, this is the story of how we've started. I couldn't find Dominion, the replay game, and I said, I shoot an email to Rio Grande and said, can I buy Dominion? And that's where it all started. So 5 years ago, we were actually looking for a place to play, because pinapaalis kami sa McDo. Sa Red Ribbon, nakahanap kami ng place at pinapakain kami ganun. Okay, but now after a few years, I've actually told myself, why can't it be better? And now, when I went to, I was fortunate enough to be able to attend GenCon, and I see all of these huge games, hindi lang puro Funko Pop, but actually every hall had a lot of tables, whether it's RPG, whether it's CCG, whether it's board games. And I said, why couldn't it be like this in the Philippines? And then I asked myself again, I saw Eric Lang. Why can't he go to the Philippines? And now he's... Gaming Library, just for the fun facts, has grown to be able to 3 times in just the past 2 years. We've grown to having... Aside from having our own stores, we've actually expanded to be able to help fellow entrepreneurs who want to start their own board game business. So we service over 25 board game cafes popping out all over the country. And that's, instead of competition, they're actually helping grow the board game community here in the Philippines. It's actually because of a lot of people who not just put up their money for board games, but actually who spend their time and effort to actually come here, like you guys, spend their time and effort to actually help build the community. And that's what we're all about. It's not just about money, it's actually warm bodies. One of the key metric namin ni Adrian whenever we attend cons, whenever we do tournaments, is not how many people bought a core set, it's actually how many people joined and tried the game. And that's all that mattered to us. In 2016, some of the few things that we want to announce is, instead of just being a distributor of, walang kwenta na yung news na, magdadagdag sila ng bagong publisher. Or, we added a lot of publishers from Europe, coming from SM. It's actually just a normal everyday thing. What I actually want to formally announce to everyone is that we have 5 working prototypes of the first co-published board game in the Philippines. And it's not against Cards Filipinos. What we're doing is all above board. It's actually Codenames Philippines. It's not just a direct translation. We just didn't translate a hospital to hospital. Okay? Hindi ganun. We added a lot of Filipino culture because we said the Philippines deserves better and we want you guys to have more fun with it. So you'll see a lot of your favorite words out there. Adobo, yes, adobo. And lechon. So in 5 minutes, actually the team downstairs is starting to set up all of the prototypes. You're free to try them out. We're also placing pre-orders again. We got a limited run coming in July. So hopefully you'll be able to enjoy those and then let us know how you like it. In the future, we hope to not just translate or localize code names, but maybe some more of Eric Lang's games as well. Okay. Thank you for joining us this talk. Try out the Codenames Philippines edition and let us know how you find it. Thank you.
Just to close everything, we would like to thank you, everyone, for coming here. If you want to talk or have something signed with Eric, he'll be available here or at the booth. So that's it. Thank you very much, everyone.
So just to repeat, two things. One, I know just so that we manage it. I know some people I think brought some stuff to sign. May want to take pictures with him. Let's do it in order. Sorry, just to manage. So, first major announcement I want to reiterate. This room, we're announcing it first. When you go back to the booth at the gaming library booth, all the demos will now be Codenames Philippines for the next 3 hours. So there are 5 tables there that are running the first 5 copies, prototype copies of the game. So if you want to be one of the first to try to play them, and try to tell us why is this word there, why is this word not there, you may go right after this talk. Second, maybe just for a few minutes, Eric Lang can, if you brought some stuff to sign, if you want to take photos with him, he can. He just has, after about 10 to 15 minutes, some meetings. Some people from the press will want to talk to him, so we'll have them in this room. Okay? So just to manage the time. But, however, Eric will still go back to the booth. And if you catch him at the booth, in fact, he has some time, he might be able to show you some of his prototypes and you might be able to play with him. His upcoming games. Alright? Not tuk-tuk. Cannot. NDA? No NDA. Just not tuk-tuk. Alright. Thank you again. We hope to see you at the booth downstairs.
Can we just ask for everyone to just stay here? We just want to take a picture of Eric with everyone.
Yeah.
You guys may want to stand in or whatever. Alright.
I'd like to ask a question. Yes. Smart.
Alright. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Oh, 50 na tayo. Waki. 1, 2, 3.